So this is the second Great Brush discussion. The first one we did back in April, following uh, the gameplay reveal where they put Turf War footage on Twitter, and we were basing our opinions purely off 3 minutes worth of gameplay. And somehow I think we still went for 2 hours. Today
Yep.
the plan is to discuss actually having played the game and being able to actually experience both weapons, give some insight from our playtime with them, and at this time we're going to aim to try and keep it within an hour. So if everyone wants to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Alex. I used to play Splatoon competitively. I was in the last discussion, and I was the guy you could barely hear.
Hi, I'm Chara. I do content on YouTube, and I've played Octobrush since Splatoon 1. I've used it in top level sets in both games, and I'm here to also talk about the weapon, so it's pretty cool.
Hi, I'm Hammer. I'm starting to get into Octobrush content. I haven't made anything quite yet, but I think this will be a good start to it. I one trick vanilla Octobrush. Basically, I've been doing that since early 2018, and I'm trying to go farther up in the competitive field.
Yeah, I'm Spore. I play primarily Inkbrush at like high level, and I make content once every n days, where n is a completely random number. So yeah, hi.
We've got a couple things we have prepared that we're going to discuss. The first one is our opinions on the kits, and that's just simple. What would we think? Do we like the kits? Do we think they're bad? And then the next one is what do we think the second kit for both should be? So if we think, oh, well, after having seen all the specials and the subs, do we think that this kit would be better for the Octobrush and Inkbrush Nouveau? And then the third is where do we think they sit in terms of tiers? Basically, pretty much what it says. Where do we think they would be tiered? Fourth is what maps do they play well in? Which maps do we think they performed well in? Pretty simple. Five is do they feel better or worse than Splatoon 2? This is probably going to be a bit of a quicker one since the weapons are pretty much one to one with their Splatoon 2 counterparts. Like none of the data has seemingly changed at all. Then six is do we feel like they need any changes? So do we think they need to be buffed, nerfed, anything like that? And then finally, our predictions on if they will have a place in the meta. This is mostly like a meta prediction thing, sort of be like, if we think certain comps are going to be good at launch, does the Octobrush and Inkbrush fit into any of those? And then we're just going to go through alphabetical order. So we'll just get started immediately with the first one being our opinions on the kits, and you can start, Alex.
All right. So, opinion on Octobrush kit. I think the kit's great. I think suction works great with it. Gives it a poking bomb, and Zipcaster just it gives it an option to like not only just try to go forward, but also gives it maybe a chance to get back if it's put on the back foot. And I think the kit works really well with it. And I was really excited when they announced that Zipcaster was on Octobrush, and I think it just works really well. And I can see it being like mainly a Slayer kind of weapon. But for vanilla Inkbrush, I don't think it works that well with it, especially the Killer Whale. Um, I think it's really fun, but I don't think it'll be like particularly good. Um, and I just think it needs some sort of special that can help it. I had something, but I lost it.
I like Octobrush's kit first up. I think suction is okay for it. The whitening frames and combined with the ink efficiency mean it's not as useful as a few other different bombs. Like I think something like Fizzy Torpedo or even Splat Bomb and of course Burst Bomb would all be better for it, but I think suction is like fine. Very similar to my thoughts with suction on range, which is like it is a bomb. You can poke and do damage and paint and stuff. So like it's never going to be a bad thing to have a suction bomb, but I think for Octobrush it's kind of okay. Um, I do think it kind of needs a bomb, just unless if it gets Reef Slider, that's like the only special in the game where it's like, okay, this thing can be good without a bomb. So I'm glad it has that. Zipcaster for it is interesting. I think it's going to be nice for it right now because there really isn't another Zipcaster weapon that would ever be considered better than it outside of Luna and Tower Control, I guess. like generally the way Octobrush works with Zipcaster and having the rolling to mix in with it means it's the best Zipcaster weapon, and because Zipcaster is good at going in unique angles, it kind of guarantees it a niche, but I'll talk about that more later. I think it's good to help get the weapon up close. It plays in with the weapon's mobility, and it's a good special for it for sure. So as long as the special is in a solid spot, I like it. As for Inkbrush, I feel like they finally made a Splat Bomb Inkbrush kit that isn't terrible. I know the previous two ones weren't really that useful. So, the way I see this is not trying to be Inkbrush Nuvo 2.0. Like, this isn't trying to be that same playstyle. It's trying to be different. You can play around your paint and bomb to poke, so you're not useless and neutral. You farm a useful special, and then you use the Killer Whale to basically wherever you want to go, you're whaling to check if there's someone in that area. You pick your target, you have them running from the lasers, and then while they're running, you run, take your spot, and either go for a kill on that person, go for a kill on someone you've separated, or take space and paint. And then because you have the bomb and the fast paint output of the brush itself, you can kind of just play around that over and over again. So, to me, it's an entirely different playstyle than what the good brush in Splatoon 2 and 1 was for Inkbrush. So it's something that people will have to learn. I don't think it's as good as the Inkbrush Nuvo playstyle in 2, simply because like the ability to play behind people and keep yourself alive with a special is something no other weapon can do. And I think this kit, while it's like good on Inkbrush, like you could put it on Octobrush and it'd work fine, or you could put it on other fast weapons and do kind of the same thing. I still think it's a very fun kit, and it's a kit that makes sense. And if the later Inkbrush Nuvo kit gets something interesting, then this could be a nice alternate playstyle for it. I think it's also going to be good. I like both of them, to be honest.
I actually have like a very narrowed perspective on this because I really only play like just the Octobrush for the majority of the time. I'm gonna be honest, I was not really a fan of Suction Bomb when I first heard it was gonna be on the kit. And playing it, I kind of changed my mind a little bit. It didn't feel as bad, but if you don't have good like ink conservation skills, I guess, then it's gonna hurt you a lot, especially with the fact that the Zipcaster cannot get ink when you're in the special. Like if you run an ink in the special, you're kind of stuck like that, and Suction Bomb takes up so much of your tank. So to me, if you're really bad with bombs, it's not really the best kit in my opinion. But again, like Chara was saying, Suction Bomb, and it's decent or it could be really good depending if people are paying attention to the map. Trying to think what else I could add to Octobrush that hasn't been said. I guess I'll just move on to Inkbrush. um, so again, I only played a couple games with Inkbrush, and the first thing I actually really liked the kit. It felt really aggressive in my opinion. I liked having Splat Bomb, and I liked just it's a fast moving weapon. It's just so quick and it's just in your face, and it applies a lot of pressure, especially when you're just running up in front line to help out with another teammate. And it just I think it's really fun and a super quick, aggressive. And Killer Whale, I think, is really interesting on Inkbrush just because of the way you like pick and choose like an opponent to kind of like you could usually do it on like one person you're attacking, or you could like kind of help yourself out a little bit and do it to one or two around you. It makes it so people who are clumped up together usually get punished by not spacing out properly, good positioning, bad positioning. Um, Honestly, yeah, I can't. There's nothing really more I could really add to the kit. I would want I would want to change the Suction Bomb personally on Octobrush. I just think like it does way too much ink for the way the special doesn't get ink back. Like if Zipcaster could go into the ink like Inkjet did and get ink back, like yeah, you'd be wasting half the special, but if you needed it a little bit more, you wouldn't be screwed if you don't know how to use your ink properly. I think that's it.
I mentioned it on Twitter and in the Brush chat on the Academy. I really like both kits. I think both kits were pretty close to the ideal thing I could have asked for. The Octobrush, the aspect of the Octobrush I did actually utilize the most is actually the bomb itself. I am so used to playing vanilla Octobrush in Splatoon 2 that I'm not used to having a real bomb. So for the most of my footage, I don't throw suction bombs nearly as much as I should have, and that's just an aspect of my play that I messed up on. But having an actual lethal bomb on it is pretty good. It's something that, while yes, the Kensa Octobrush has in Splatoon 2, it's still the Kensa Octobrush is just sort of a okay option. All the brushes are just like, well, Octobrushes are okay options. So this having like a lethal bomb and then a special that I feel has one of like the highest potentials and then also like the lowest potential. I'll talk about it more in my tier spot, but the Zipcaster I feel is going to make or break the vanilla Octobrush kit when it comes to the people that play it. It's a good kit and a good special for the weapon. It really aids to how a lot of people like to play the weapon in just being super aggressive, super rush into fights. You can use it to just chase down people. Like, I had a match where I just used it to chase an E-leader that swam away from me. You can do crazy stuff like that. But in that same potential for it to do wild, wacky things like that, I've seen so many people across the test fire just feed with it. It is probably going to be the most feast or famine special, and I'm actually really interested to see how people utilize it. But it itself, the Octobrush kit overall, I think is actually really good at doing everything the type of thing people want to play the weapon for. It's just something I can definitely see not panning out the greatest for people that want to only play like a specific way. Like, it's going to result in a lot of feeding, I feel like. And then the ink brush, I've mentioned it where even before we got to play the test fire and the leaks were coming out, like the information from it about how the whale actually played and how it functioned, I was posting stuff like, I wonder if the whale would be good as like a push buddy. Like, when you're playing Inkbrush and you want to start engaging on somebody, you have to really be concerned as to how many people are actually watching you as you move, because the thing Inkbrush can't do is handle more than one opponent at a time. If you get overwhelmed, you're screwed. But the killer whale, when you pop that and it will show you who is around you and will start to target somebody, that is a good like start to you pushing in. You pop your whale, you see who it marks, and you just rush in with it. It provides some easy chip damage along with your actual flicks itself, and functions pretty well as a way to engage on certain enemies and just pressure people away. And then also just gaining some intel. Like I said, it points out people. So I think it's really good for that aspect. It is sort of weaker in the department that, like Chara said, where it's not like a Inkbrush Nouveau 2.0, because the Inkbrush Nouveau in Splatoon 2 plays very well at keeping the weapon itself alive and active, where the whale I can see more people using it as an initiative to start fighting. But that's all I really have to say for that. So you can go ahead, Spore.
Yeah, so I'll start with Inkbrush since that's more sort of like my forte. When I first, like, fun fact, back when like 2018, like when the Sheldon's Picks weapons were announced, when I was still not that great at the game, I really wanted Perma to have Stingray, for some reason. It was a bit, I don't understand why to this day. I just thought it'd be funny. And turns out that my wish has kind of been granted in the long term. Obviously, Killer Whale is not exactly like Stingray in a lot of ways, but it is a long range. Well, it is a like good range, like laser that just targets people from across the stage, which is actually like kind of good because it plays into, I think, Inkbrush being sort of more of a like the kit's more of like a Swiss Army knife. I feel like you haven't got like the tools on Nouveau and S2 that make it so good. Basically, just all like kind of built around what makes Inkbrush as a main weapon good. Whereas in Splatoon 3, what they've kind of done is they went, okay, we've made 2 Inkbrush kits with Splat Bomb. Both of them were kind of like, why would you ever play this? So we're gonna actually like give it a special in conjunction with like Splat Bomb, which already actually does kind of a lot for it. We're actually gonna give it a special that works well with it. Literally everything that you can do in Splatoon 2, like where you like throw a bomb and then splash down and you can throw another bomb right out after, you can do that with Whale as well, because I'm pretty sure specials still do the thing where they completely refill your ink tank when you pop it. So that's going to be like a really important thing when you're playing the weapon, I think. But yeah, it's not, as people have already said here, it's not trying to be Aimbrush Nouveau 2.0, well, 3.0, but like no one wants to remember Splatoon 1 Aimbrush Nouveau. That thing was, yeah. But it's not trying to be that. It's a Swiss Army knife. It trades off that sort of like super buff, like single like Inkbrush main weapon aspect to have a variety of tools, and its tool bag I think is probably like the most varied and like not, I'd say most useful in the series so far. Obviously, like this, it's really useful just to have the baller and two just to live longer. But like having having both a sub and a special that actually like help it contribute to the game like consistently in neutral is really really big for it. And I think it's gonna be pretty good. But again, more into that in the tiering section. As for Octobrush, I think Suction Bomb is like once again like pretty okay. As Chara mentioned, the Suction Bomb is a Suction Bomb. It can't really go wrong with it. Doesn't work especially right, I would say, but Suction is just by like virtue of being a lethal bomb, like solid. So it's fine, it's there. But I think the thing that really as Silver has also said, I also think that the weapon is going to be made or broken by the Zipcaster and how well people use it. I've seen a lot of clips of people using Zipcaster in like really creative ways, just to move around the stage, pop up right next to somebody or right behind somebody, just kill them, and then like move away. I've also seen people like deliberately aim their Zipcasters straight at people, because that actually deals damage if you pass through them, and also the bouncing off of the wall does some damage, and that actually like reduces the number of flicks to kill that Octobrush requires, which is really useful for it. But I've also seen a lot of clips of people trying to do the thing like when we initially saw Zipcaster get revealed, where the splash just kind of like hooks on above somebody and then like tries to shoot them from above. I've seen people do that, and then they just instantly die the second that they like bounce off of the wall. So I think Zipcaster is gonna be like, I think it's going to be a like, it's gonna make the weapon early on, but I think as like people push the limits of what Zipcaster can do, and the rest of the player base like catches up in terms of punishing it, I think it's gonna be like, I think I don't know, it's just I can't see it like being. It's like one of those weapons where I can see it being really good for like the first couple of catalogs, let's say, but after like long enough and people get used to playing around Zipcaster, I think it's gonna like start falling off more. So yeah,
Alright.
that's my those are my 5 cents.
Okay. And then the second topic is, what do we think the second kit for both should be? So you can go ahead, Alex, with what you think they should be.
So Octobrush, there's like 3 specials that I kind of really wanted to get. Well, there's like 2 specials I really wanted to get, and third one's what I think it'll probably get. And I think those are Trizuka, Crab Tank, and the Reef Slider. Now, I think Trizuka's most likely to happen just to play off the Splatoon 1 Octobrush Nouveau thing with the whole Inkzuka. And I think it works pretty well for it. People just didn't really play Octobrush Nouveau, because why would you play it if Tenetek existed in Splatoon 1? But I think Trizuka could be a really cool special for Octobrush, because it'll give him a good ranged option without throwing yourself at the enemy. And I think Crab Tank the same can be said, where like it's a ranged option where you just don't have to risk everything to go for it. But Reef Slider, I think, will be really good on Octopus, because it's a free approach option if you can get past the startup frames. And if you use that, and it's a really good initiation where you can get your teammates to follow up. This goes for a lot of weapons like Tetras that have Reef Slider, but I think it'll be really good on Octopus, because I feel like it can just take advantage of the space that it's just opened up for its team. And I think subs is just natural as like another bomb, whereas Kara said if it gets Reef Slider, then it can just get Beacon again, because they seem to really love that on Octobrush. But yeah, but for Inkbrush, it's really hard, because I feel like this Inkbrush really shines when it's just sort of that unique supportive kit, kind of like I wouldn't say supportive, but it just kind of does whatever, kind of like Inkbrush Nouveau kind of supported like painting all over the place and just staying alive. But I think for Inkbrush, something like Big Bubber would be kind of cool, because if any of you have ever played Winston from Overwatch, you can kind of reminisce about that. It's just go inside, go outside, and they cannot hit you. And I think that would be really cool. And it's just it's just a special. I think it could work on Inkbrush, where it's like it's kind of more of like using a supportive special selfishly, where it's just like you can try to fight Inkbrush, but you are probably going to lose if it has big bubbler because it can just dip and weave out in and out. But I can also see Ink Vacuum being really good on it, since it's always going to be up front, and it can use this to bail out a teammate to try to absorb shots that are going towards them, or it can use them selfishly to try to get a sneaky kill in or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think those specials are the ones I really want to see. But for subs, I think just another bomb for Octobrush or Beacon, like I said already. And for Inkbrush, I can live with mine again. Um, but I also just hope they add like another bomb or like Fizzy or Torpedo on Inkbrush would be kind of crazy because it would be insane. But I also really hope that they add curling to Octobrush, since it could really appreciate the extra mobility it has. But it's one of two subs that I don't think is gonna happen. The other being Burst Bomb for obvious reasons.
All right, and Chara?
I think for Inkbrush, pretty simple. I'd kind of just want mine Big Bubbler. I think it would be good to have a playstyle similar to its Nuvo kit, and I think they know it works. So I think that would be fine, honestly. I don't really have too much to complain about that. And I think that's like pretty obvious that it should get a playstyle similar to what it could do in Splatoon 2. Octobrush, I'm not really sure, honestly, because I feel like its main kit is kind of what it would want. Like, I guess I could just get another similar one. I don't know. But nothing really stands out as like, I would really want this on Octobrush. Like, the closest thing I could say would be like Beacon Reef Slider, I guess. Like, kind of a more niche kit where you have the special to get you in and can set up beacons along the map afterward.
Mhm.
Like, kind of like Splow and Octobrush kit. But for the most part, it's hard to come up with a kit for Octobrush that's not like trying to do what its normal kit already does, but better. Whereas Nuvo, I feel like, or Nuvo Inkbrush, I feel like has an actual different playstyle that it can try to do.
Honestly, I think we've all just been really wanting Burst Bomb and Octobrush. So I mean, that's kind of like crossing my fingers, hoping the devs maybe put it in. If I did have to pair that with a special, I think Trizuka would be perfect. I think they would just play really well with each other, and I think it would be a cute little nostalgic thing that they could add in to Splat 1 with the Inkzuka. Just again another aggressive play style because that's how Octobrush I think plays the best. Maybe I think for like if they wanted to go like the Nouveau route where it's like a little bit more supportish, like how they would use 10 missiles in order to like call out team opponent locations. Honestly, maybe the marker might work. I don't really see it played too well, but I haven't really like thought of a support kit as well as that. I thought Tentacooler might be a really funny option. They might be able to put on a quote unquote supportish Octobrush, but that would have to play with the Octobrush in like a position where it's near its team, which it's not really going to do that as much because it kind of just goes off and does its own thing. That's why I think Zipcaster is really cool for it. Another special for Octobrush I think would be really cool would be the crab tank. I remember playing against it and it was either really brutal or die really quickly. So it's kind of like player options well. Um, I like the idea that it does have the mobility options because it's kind of like another Overwatch reference. It's like a freaking oh my god, what's his thing? I call him Hammond.
Wrecking Ball.
Yeah, Wrecking Ball.
Yeah.
I call him Hammond. So yeah, he just rolls around. So again, depending on how you want to use your special, if you want to use it more to get in farther into the map, start an engagement, or you're like, okay, we need some extra firepower, I could just pop it up right there because it's so quick. It's just like an insta special, which I think is really nice. And if you're kind of moreish in the back line or midline, then you could pop in and I think it will help your team really well. I think it's also terrifying that Octobrush having that just being able to pop in your face and they can't get a kill on you, I think would be pretty brutal. But other than that, on the only option the only thing I really want for it is the burst bomb, obviously. I probably won't complain too much if they give it beacon again. I don't really play the beacon one that much, but if they give it a decent special, I might try a different version of Octobrush playing. Because I don't know if another version of Octobrush will be the one I pick. because we don't know them yet. So I'm really excited to see what kits they choose. Inkbrush, I don't really have like again, I don't really play Inkbrush much, so I don't really have much to say on what it could do. Maybe give Inkbrush Crab Tank might be an interesting choice. Other than that, I don't really have really anything I could think of for Inkbrush.
For Octobrush, the ideal subs would be either Curling Bomb or Burst Bomb. And of course, I don't think either of those are likely to happen. And if they do, Curling Bomb is probably the most likely of the two to occur, just because it's not really as oppressive as Burst Bomb with it could be. Uh, in a realistic sense, I think the line marker or just Beacon again is probably the most likely thing it's going to get. For the special, I would actually like the Big Bubbler. And it's the same sort of playstyle like playing as Winston in Overwatch. You place down a bubble and you play by bouncing in and out of your bubble as a close range sort of melee character that Winston is, at least in Overwatch 1. So to have an Octobrush that plays similar to that type of design where you can chase down a brush, but he places down his bubble, and now it's like it becomes a mind game of do you try to actually engage into this brush, or do you just let the brush get away with existing in that area and then can just flee because you don't want to engage in that? I could see that being the case, or they could try to do the Beacon and the Trizuka to have it be a mix of Splatoon 1, because the way the Suction Bomb and Zipcaster feels like now reminds me very much of a mix of the Kraken, of the Vanilla Octobrush, and the Splat Bomb of the Nouveau in Splatoon 1. So if they wanted to try and flip-flop it, so the Octobrush Nouveau here has the Beacon that the Vanilla had, and then give it like the Trizuka that the Nouveau had, I feel like that's probably something that could happen if they didn't want to go the a route of just being purely support. For Inkbrush, I think the only thing that might logically happen, and people might not like it, is it's probably going to get Ink Mine Crab Tank. I could definitely see that being the case, just because they love to give the Inkbrush Ink Mine and then pair it with something that just sort of like drags it along. Like Vanilla Inkbrush in the first game had Ink Mine and Bubbler. Like that was kind of silly, but to have it have Crab Tank makes it feel very similar to that type of design where you just roll around, you have your ink mines for whatever purpose, and then you still have a special that helps you maintain your life and just keeps you alive and staying in the fight. I think that's probably the most likely to happen, and I think that would be perfectly okay. I think that would be a good complement to the type of kit the Inkbrush has right now, to just sort of be like the vanilla right now would be like I mentioned, like a push enabler. Like that's how you would use your whale and push in with it, and that's how you start your fights and your gauges. But the Nouveau having like a crab tank would mean that that was a stabilizer. If you're already in a fight and you want to keep going, or you want to stay safe in it, you can pop your crab tank and try to stay in the fight, or just roll out and maintain your life. So I think that that's probably the most likely kit that the Inkbrush Nouveau is going to get.
So Inkbrush, the vanilla kit is like as we said, like as I said earlier, it's like kind of a sort of jack of all trades. You've got a nice variety of tools that you can use in like various situations. So I think for the Nouveau kit, they kind of like have to do something similar to what they did in Splatoon 2, where the first Inkbrush kit has like a variety of tools. I put variety in air quotes because it is stuck with the fabled legendary splashdown, best special weapon in the universe. So powerful that they've banished it to the solo campaign for Splatoon 3, I think. But for the Nouveau kit, they like basically just honed in on the survivability aspect of Inkbrush, and like I think in Splatoon 2 they're going to do something similar. They might not hone in exactly on the survivability, but I think they're going to do something akin to that. I think Inkmine is basically guaranteed. It's been on the Nouveau kit 2 games in a row. I want the hat trick. They have to do the hat trick. But for the special, I think it's a little up in the air. Baller obviously worked on Inkbrush Nouveau for a variety of reasons, and despite like the special weapon kind of like being sort of written off as, oh, it can only do like one or two things now and it doesn't do them very well, one of those things being the fact that you can shred it. Um, that's the point it's at now. But I think those sort of like use case, like the different use cases of Baller that are left in Splatoon 2 have kind of been split apart into different sort of specials. So Crab Tank is the obvious one. And I think like using sort of defensive ballers. So what I mean by that is like, let's say you're holding the zone, the enemy team is pushing back in. You can baller where the enemy team is going to go, and they have to try and shred your baller, or they have to risk you like blowing up and then just like running away and then getting their attention like split between two different sides, like between objective and between the stinky brush on like like 50 degrees to the right or something. However, for aggressive ballers, like ballers to try and get in, Reef Slider I think like does that a lot better. So I could see them giving it Crab Tank for like that sort of more sort of defensive sort of side of baller, or for the more aggressive side of things they could just give it Reef Slider. Either way, I would be very happy. Both of those specials would enable Inkbrush particularly well. However, I'm also open to the idea of them just slapping it with like Booyah Bomb or something, just because I think it'd be funny. As for the subs, like Inkmine is obviously the one that I'm hoping for, but some subs that I'd really want to see on it include Burst Bomb because they're obvious, but also Auto Bomb on Inkbrush I think would be really nice, and it would sort of flip the script because obviously Auto Bomb was on Octobrush in the last game, so it'd be really cool to have it on Inkbrush in this game. Because I'd like to have a couple of parallels between the two kits in each game in one way or another. As for Octobrush, I had like a really bizarre idea, which was instead of giving Big Bubbler to Inkbrush, you give Big Bubbler to Octobrush, because Octobrush is like it's still got the same stats in 3 as it does in 2. And there are moments where if Octobrush just had like a little bit more survivability while it was rolling, it would be able to like get from point A to point B a lot more easily, and be able to get into really key annoying positions that it could take and just hold, thanks to the fact that if you approach that thing the wrong way and the Octobrush has an advantage in the duel, it just straight up wins. I think Big Bubbler would be really good to sort of like help it bridge the gap between those 2 points, and also just it's a nice little point for like teammates to use as well as they sort of rotate around where the Octobrush is going. As like for other specials, I think I would like to see Inkjet return. To be honest, I think Inkjet like coming back would be very nice. I really liked Inkjet on Octobrush in this game, especially mostly because like I think most of my S2 Octobrush experience has been playing it in like exclusively Rainmaker, and Inkjet is kind of nutty in that mode. So I just like that back because I enjoyed the playstyle and how it sort of meshed with the modes. But I'd also be open to something like, as Hammer suggested, like maybe more a supportive kit. Give it Tacticooler for the meme, but also just like Inkvac could be potentially really interesting, seeing as Octobrush doesn't always like to be as far forward as Inkbrush, and I think like Inkvac and like good use of Inkvac is not right at the front of the push, but sort of like a little bit behind your main sort of run in and gun shooters, if you know what I mean. Sub-weapon for Octobrush, honestly, it's gotten a lethal bomb already. I think like some sort of tool to really help Octobrush sort of like control space is such a vague term, but like I would like something like either another bomb, like let's say maybe Auto Bomb again, or even something like Toxic Mist. Like I've been thinking a lot about Toxic Mist on Brush recently. I think it could be very very interesting, and it provides some of this like same sort of utility that a Burst Bomb might provide, just without any of the damage. But also you can throw it at a Tacticooler and then people drink it and then can't squid roll away or whatever. So that's a pretty nice thing, I think. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking currently for the secondary kits. I'll also try Zuka for Octobrush Nouveau. Would be very hot. Yeah.
All right, and then the third one is, where do we feel they sit in terms of tiers? So if we were to tier them like in traditional sense of like D, C, B, A, S, where do we feel they sit? And a little explanation as to why.
So I think Octobrush is just gonna be really strong at the launch of the game because a lot of new players, a lot of people are not going to be used to the new mechanics. I think Good Dodge is gonna help the brushes a lot in general, just for just approaching purposes. Once people figure out how to approach with the squid roll and squid roll forward. And ink brush, I feel it's gonna take a little while for people to get used to it. But I think over the course, when the meta starts to develop and people figure things out, I feel like ink brush is gonna people are gonna find uses for ink brush. And I feel that once a shooter comes out with Zipcaster that has a bomb, I feel like that will put a little pressure on Octobrush and make it make a fall in the tier list a little bit. And I think people will figure out Inkbrush, and they'll come up with something with Inkbrush, and it'll be really good again. Well, not really good, but just good, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We
Then
ain't. Oh, never mind. Sorry.
that's all right.
Personally, I don't really think a traditional tier really suits Octobrush because the way I see Octobrush right now is it is your Zipcaster niche. So like if it's a map where you really want a Zipcaster to get a unique push angle, that's probably the weapon you're gonna play. And if you don't need that, then there's not really any major reason you need to play this weapon. It like works okay with everything else. It doesn't really do anything that I find super special. Like it just feels like your standard close range Zipcaster niche. And I agree, like, if a short range shooter ends up getting Zipcaster, I think it might even do it better than Octobrush. So I don't even know if that will last. Um, I guess I can bring up some discussion about if the main weapon needs changes right now, but I think at the moment it's fine. It'll be a Zipcaster niche weapon. I don't really have a number tier to put it in. Inkbrush, on the other hand, I think looks better. I would probably say it's probably going to be A, not S. It has a very defined playstyle. It's one of the best weapons for whale output, if not the best weapon. And I think it would work well with anything that would be meta. If Splatoon 3 is fast-paced, which is what it seems like, Inkbrush can not only be good for that, but it also works great with Tacticooler, and Tacticooler, as we know, is the best special in the game right now. So if you want to do your usual Inkbrush plan, you know, the bomb, paint, and then killer whale in, and then you get a Tacticooler, you also have a backup plan, and you can do that plan and then go trade or kill two and come back quickly. So I think Inkbrush synergizes very well with what will probably be good, as well as having a much more important role, where Octobrush looks like it'll just kind of be a Zipcast niche, and I don't really see too much else outside of that as to why to play the weapon.
Honestly, I say that word a lot starting out. So funny enough with the tier list, it's funny because on TikTok a lot of the casuals think Octobrush is like a godlike weapon, because they don't know how to fight it. So discussion on this weapon I think also varies based on modes where I think Octobrush is freaking really good in Rainmaker. So it may go up a tier for Rainmaker, but it may go down a tier for another mode depending on how the map layout is going to be for these modes because we don't know that yet. I still think it's going to be really strong in Rainmaker, especially if it as a kit happens to get inkjet again, which I think will be freaking amazing personally. um Honestly, I just see it as like really solid right now. It's not like too crazy good, but it's not like bad. Like you could pick it up and you're gonna get results with it, depending on how you utilize the special, utilize, you know, ink usage with the bomb. It could be like a crazy slayer, or it could be something that just does all right. I think I just see it as like really solid right now. I think it can get better, and I think it will get better when the game first comes out and all these specials are really aggressive and really quick, and it pairs really good with like Tacticooler and other aggressive teammates. And for now, I think since Charger's actually really good too, I think people may even play the weapon for the Zipcaster, kind of going into the backline, taking out a good Charger and coming back, or whatever good backline is, kind of pressuring everybody. So maybe you might use it because another team is just doing really good holding the back and putting a lot of pressure on the team. But yeah, I think it's just gonna like you play it as it's situational. So I think really, really solid, honestly, just solid.
Okay. Um, I I mentioned earlier, I think Octobrush is probably going to be the most feast or famine of like any of the Zipcaster weapons. And I would say at its highest, I think it would probably sit at a B at its absolute highest. And that's purely just off the potential it has to feed as much as it does to have to do anything. And then I think out of all of the Zipcaster weapons, it's probably the one that, unless it's like exclusively locked to like right now, I think like Luna, Carbon, Octobrush, it's probably the better of the three right now, but only by like an inch. And then if something like a actual mid short range shooter comes out with it, it's definitely going to be the next tier above it. Octobrush is probably sitting in this position where it's the best go-to zipcaster until literally any other zipcaster comes out, in which case it just sort of flounders at its mid-level tier of this is a good solid zipcaster weapon, not the best, but has the most potential to just feed. Where if like say if a splash had it or a sploosh had it, those are probably the more likely to have more value inherently just by having it because they're just better shooters and do more like have a faster output than the Octobrush. So I definitely think the Octobrush is probably just going to sit at B at most, even during like a peak. Like if there was a meta that Octobrush sat perfectly in, I still think it would just sit at B, just purely based off how much potential it has to do to flip flop, either doing well or doing exceptionally bad. Inkbrush, I agree. I think it sits in A. It does its job fantastically well. Its kit is built around like the idea of how people want to play the Inkbrush. Its kit does so many things well that I think even if a weapon came out that had the same exact one-to-one kit, the Inkbrush just plays so fast that gives the advantage to it. And with the Tacticooler, like Chara said, like having the ideal Inkbrush playstyle with this kit, and then you just give it Tacticooler, like it just enables that sort of playstyle so much more. And Tacticooler's looking to be like the default go-to, at least have one on a comp. So if your team is designed to play super fast and the meta plays super fast, the Inkbrush is just going to be a really solid, just put it in there, it'll do whatever we want it to do sort of playstyle. And I think that that's going to just put it at A, unless something like a similar weapon comes out with the same exact kit that can paint a little bit better. But even then, it's the advantage that Inkbrush gets is the pace it can play at. So I'd put Octobrush at B at most, and Inkbrush sits firmly in A.
So I'm gonna continue on for with the Inkbrush side of things. Inkbrush's strength is not just that it can play fast, in my opinion, but especially with the kit that it has in 3, it is able to adjust its pacing according to the game extremely well. Like, there's a reason why even in this shooter meta, where like almost everybody and their mother is running like quad shooter or 3 shooters and a splatling, there's a reason why Inkbrush is like one of the few non-shooters that is still like doing pretty well, and it's because it can adjust its pace like to the game extremely well. It has a kit that enables it to do that as well. Has a whole bevy of tools at its disposal. So yeah, I think it's definitely an A tier. Like I say, a fairly like mid-high A tier, but like I don't feel comfortable ranking each individual tier at the moment, especially because the game's not out for another like 5 days. So I definitely put Inkbrush in A tier. It has like it has a lot of like a much more sort of versatile toolkit in this game, which is going to be really helpful. There's things around it that also enable it extremely well. For example, Tacticooler is just a godsend because it means that even though you can't really feed with Baller anymore for the time being, at the very least, you can take one sip of a Red Bull and you're golden pretty much. Another thing that I think like really like is going to help Inkbrush in the long run is how good Inkvac is going to be, because we've all seen how stupidly broken Tacticooler is. Giving 57 AP of 7, I think it's 7 abilities, like, which is just not okay, by the way. But like for Inkvac, I think Inkvac is definitely sitting there as one of the other best specials in the game right now. And Inkvac sucks up literally anything that paints, which also includes the Ultra Stamp when you throw it, because that technically paints when it hits a surface. So, like, there aren't very many answers to ink vac, is what I'm saying. But Killer Whale doesn't paint the floor. It's just sound. It's just like concentrated, awful dubstep that like teenagers blast on the bus at like 4 a.m. or whatever. So, because of that, you Airbrush actually has a tool to deal with ink vac users, and one of the primary, like a lot of the primary ink vac users that are in the game right now, are honestly like kind of food for it. Like Airbrush does well against Tenterbrella. It like does pretty well against VJ. It's gonna do better against VJ now that VJ can't slow down with Mist, and that Airbrush has that Splat Bomb as well. But having Whale to deal with ink vac weapons is, I think, gonna be like a really big asset for it in the long run. Speaking of slapping jet squelchers, Octobrush having Zipcaster is gonna really help it in that regard for a while, because I mentioned earlier that, like, if you use Zipcaster and you give too much, like, once you pop off the wall, if you have too much space between yourself and the opponent, you're going to get punished for it. Yeah, Jet Scorcher is, like, not really able to punish that super well. It's still a 4-shot kill weapon, and though it does have the marker pen is incredibly precise. So I think, like, as Hammer mentioned, Octobrush is going to be pretty dandy when it comes to, like, getting into someone's backline and just, like, ripping it to shreds. But as I think the overall thing with Octobrush is, like, has been mentioned several times already, sort of that, like, how good Zipcaster is. Like, it is, I think, the weapon that is the best at abusing Zipcaster right now compared to things like Carbon and Luna, and once it comes out, the Splatana Stamper. But ultimately, it might be the best at using Zipcaster. But if Zipcaster is, like, kind of mid, it's not gonna be a particularly great weapon choice. Like, it's all right. Like in Splatoon 2, it's an all right main weapon at dealing with like the shoot, like the quad and triple shooter like comps that you see everywhere these days. The sub is also just like all right for it, as previously mentioned. So I don't feel comfortable putting Octobrush in any sort of tier. I'd probably just put in a separate tier called yes, if with like 3 dots at the end, because it's just very up in the air right now. I don't think it's going to be a bad weapon at all by any means, so you can put that tier in the wrong, like, I don't know, maybe between like A and B, like, if you want to be like symbolic about it, or you can just have it completely separate. But for now, like, I think Octobrush, like, putting it in a tiering rung is just not a good idea. I think I want to wait until the game actually comes out and I get to play it, and we get to see it try and do its thing in early Splatoon 3 competitive. However chaotic it will be, spoiler alert, it's going to be extremely chaotic. Tacticooler is broken, please nerf. Yeah. So Inkbrush, like, definitely A tier. Octobrush, in like just a tier that's just a bunch of asterisks.
What maps do we feel that they played well in? Now, we didn't get every map, obviously, but what is, like, at least one map we think that the weapons played pretty well in?
I'm going to start with the returning maps. I think Octobrush works well on Makamart, because I think it worked well in that stage in Splatoon 2, and I don't think they really changed much in that stage because it was probably one of the best stages in Splatoon 2. I think new Mahi Mahi is gonna be. I think it might be really good there since the mid is so cramped when the water is up, and I think that'll be good for Octobrush, but it's also pretty open, so I think we'll have to wait on seeing that one. But I think it could have a chance there just because of how small it is, when a small mid is when the water is up. But when the water's down, it also has more cover to go around, so it might be good. Um, I don't think it'll be really good for Scorch Gorge, um, because I think it's really big, and I think it favors a long ranged weapons, pretty sizable amount. It's not. It can deal with Scorch Gorge. I just don't think it'll be ideal for it. Um. I think what was that one stage I was Mincemeat Metalworks. I think it'll be really good on that. I think at the mid has good cover, and the grates. It doesn't just cover like shoot through the grates. It covers the entire grates that's in mid. So if you're on the grates and there's an Octobrush below you, you are dying. Like no if and or buts. You are dead. And especially since there's the big grate in the middle that it still covers in its entirety, I think it'll be pretty good for that stage. Same with Inkbrush too, because it's low enough that Inkbrush can still kill people without question on that stage.
Mhm.
And I don't know about Wahoo. I believe they removed the timer for the bridge on Wahoo, so I think it's always up. Correct me if I'm wrong.
They did
Bye.
not do that.
They did not do that. Okay,
No.
I got
It's
a little.
still a timer.
The only change is TC Wahoo first check is on the top instead of going down. That is literally it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still terrible, and we're gonna have to play it in tournament, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because new game, right? That makes Rainmaker
we
Wahoo.
got we
Certainly.
gotta yeah, we have to test all the maps out, right? Like
I waited
totally.
5 years.
I love sitting still for 2.5 minutes per game.
I
Same.
waited 5 years, and this is how I return.
At least it's
Oh,
not
yeah, there you go.
Then never mind. It's gonna be terrible on Wahoo. Museum, I think it'll be all right, especially with Zipcaster with Octobrush. I think it'll be pretty good on Museum. I think the Museum is going to be one of those Zipcaster stages where you kind of want it if it's good. And yeah, I haven't got to play Hammerhead yet. I haven't played Hagglefish, and I think Inkblot. It's going to be one of those options where it's like it's pretty good, and Undertow is also going to be one of those another Zipcaster stage. And yeah, that's some of my thoughts.
So I would love to give like a lot of opinions on the stages, but frankly, we've only really played them on their turf war layouts, and I'm someone who has looked at all of the other ones, but A, I don't know how much you guys want me to talk about it, and B, talking about 12 maps on 4 modes would be exhausting. So I will give my kind of overview opinions to keep this discussion short like we had planned. I think the stages in general look a little bit more open with a little bit more alternate routes, which is always good for Brush. That can play in a lot of different locations. It looks like a few maps will have valuable Zipcaster spots if the ranked modes don't change too much, and for the ones that I do know, it seems like it'll still be somewhat valuable, so I think Octobrush doesn't really have any map it hates outside of like Wahoo, and it doesn't, so it's just kind of okay. Inkbrush, kind of similar thoughts. I think most of the stages are fine for it. I don't really think the stages are going to be that different in terms of like viability for Brush. I think they'll be more fun to play on. They might be slightly better, but I don't think it's a game-changing thing regardless.
Honestly, I think I'm gonna start out. Oh my god, say that word too much. I don't know if you guys ever saw the clip on Twitter where somebody did Zipcaster to the top. I think it was Scorch Gorge, and there was like a tower even higher, and it had grates on, and like you were able to go up to the top, and you painted
yeah.
below, and that was really interesting because I already liked Scorch Gorge as it was, and I wish I had saw that. I saw that way after the test fire was done. But if I had to start out, I think Scorched Gorge was probably my favorite. I think that's the one I'm talking about, the one with the tower in the middle. It kind of resembled Black Belly in a way, with the way the layout was, with the tower being really tall in the middle, and then people kind of like fight for it. That was really fun to play on because now that you have like it's like the squid roll, the squid jump, where you're on the side of the wall and then you can like hold it and go up higher. I think that makes playing mid really interesting for Brush, and the layout was a little bit more open, which I liked open layouts. I didn't really like Mahi until the second stage. I don't think a lot of people did. It felt too cramped, but not in the way where it felt like it favored my weapon, but it felt like I just kind of got stuck everywhere I went, and I felt really exposed. And especially, I wouldn't even touch the side areas. We had to jump to the extra ledges because I just felt like a sitting target. So Mahi was kind of not as much of an enjoyable experience until the second stage. I was like, oh yeah, everything is open. You know, my brush doesn't get blocked by 10,000 walls. I can actually hit people now. Um, and where Scorch Gorge was open, where I didn't have that problem, and then going across the grates, it wasn't a long track of a grate, so I didn't feel like if I went across it, I was going to be taken out really quickly. And if we're talking about maps, to also play with like the special that we know, which is Zipcaster. A lot of ways to get in, like a lot of open walls. So once you hit that grate, you just hit a wall real quick, and then you could start spawn camping them um, in the front, which also made museum really fun. It was all those walls and all those moving objects that made like hooking onto something really fun, and then you could like come in, maybe hold the wall a little bit, and then drop down on somebody, which was always exciting. So museum play, I didn't play Octobrush for Splatoon 1, so playing Octobrush for museum was an enjoyable experience because I was only a junior main, so I'd seen it from another perspective. I was like, oh, I actually really liked it. I just am a fan of the towers that sit in the middle for whatever reason, just because I like sharking up on the walls and using it as a way to like move around players. Other than that, nobody likes Wahoo. I did not like Wahoo coming back. I think it'll be interesting to play with any. What I don't think there was many changes from what you guys were saying. I only played like the last quarter of the test fire, so I only got like those, and then Undertow Spillway. Undertow Spillway was pretty fun. The glass was interesting. I never like it. Kind of reminded me like Schellendorf. I wouldn't really go top much unless like I was using it with my special. But the bottom was I liked that like little narrow. I'm trying to find the words for this. It's like a little narrow little peak in the middle, and then you could actually paint the sides of that peak. And even though it's really short, it made like interesting ways to hide or move around mid. So I think that was I really liked that one. And that it was just really mahi that I had like an issue with. Maybe I just wasn't utilizing the crap spaces as well. But I didn't like how exposed I felt, and I felt like I was like hitting every object. I felt like I would get stuck in ink really easily because everybody was so confined. Other than that, I had to see the ranked modes on those maps to see if they play any better. Because like you guys are saying, the turf war maps are going to be a different playstyle, and we're not really going to touch them moving forward when the game comes out.
I would say uh, I definitely liked Spillway a lot for the angles you can get with the Zipcaster. Like there was a really easy way to just flank any sort of backliner from your safe side, and then just flank them, kill them, and then just jump back, and you're completely safe. The maps were, I think, a lot of the design for the new maps really played into like, oh well, we have to design it this way and these walls because we have to account for Zipcaster users. So a lot of the maps do feature really fun ways for the Zipcaster to be utilized. So I definitely think a lot of the maps are good. Spillway and Gorge were the ones that I felt I played the best in. And then Museum was also a really good one. Museum was traditionally a really good brush map to begin with in Splatoon 1. So it's good that ultimately not a whole lot changed that shifted that at all. Like, really, the only thing that changed on Museum was like your spawn area. The mid, like the pits where the zone would be, are a bit higher up. They don't go as deep. And then the drop down area. That's pretty much it. Museum, I didn't really need like a whole lot of adjusting to the map itself. The map itself was fine enough. So it's still playing like a really good brush map, I think is fine. I think all the maps were pretty good in general. I think that, yeah, I just think that Museum, Spillway, and Scorch Gorge are the ones that I feel like I played the best in.
Like some of the maps, like I think a lot of the maps actually seem very fun for Brush to play on. I'm a really big fan of Museum coming back. Playing Splatoon 1 as a casual in S rank with stick controls, Octobrush was always felt really nice on Museum. It was one of my favorite stages, I think, by the end of my time playing that game. So I'm really glad to see it come back. I think also like something as well that a lot of these maps have is they have a lot of very subtle changes in terrain. So Octobrush is gonna really like that because it has Zipcast. It can use like the really slight changes in elevation to sort of obscure its Zipcaster as it moves along. So I think maps like Eel is it? Oh no, is it Undertow Spillway? I think that was the name of it. Yeah, Undertow Spillway. I think that's like gonna be a pretty good stage because it has those changes in elevation. Not only that, but it has this pipe along the middle, which if you're an Octobrush player or if you've ever fought against a good Octobrush, you know they'll like to take high ground a lot of the time and abuse it. And Undertow happens to have that right in the middle of the stage, overlooking both zones on Splat zones, which I'm very much looking forward to. Not, but yeah, generally a lot of these stages seem like pretty solid for like Octobrush and for Zipcaster, which is good because as we've mentioned, Zipcaster kind of makes and breaks Octobrush at the same time. The one stage that I am really sad about that I'm gonna have to play on as an Inkbrush player is Wahoo. I do not like the fact that Wahoo is back, not for the conventional reason of Wahoo is cringe, but because as someone who primarily played Airbrush Nouveau, I actually low-key enjoyed Wahoo Zones and Wahoo Clams because it presented it presented this sort of unique problem of, okay, Wahoo, you have to kind of play it like this. Airbrush sort of plays into that, sort of doesn't play into that. So it was one of those maps that I liked playing because it forced you to be creative with what limitations you had. And Wahoo is still just as limited a map as ever. Probably the biggest compliment we're going to give Wahoo World on this stream today. So any Wahoo World enjoyers watching this, it gets worse from here. But for things not only is Wahoo still limited, but Inkbrush now has a much more varied toolkit. And personally, I'm not looking forward to having to relearn how to play Wahoo to play primarily around the top side of the map where everything that can shoot me is, compared to where on Splatoon 2 where I have a baller, I can abuse the flanks in really creative ways to set up really good situations where I can baller behind people or baller in front of them depending on what my team needs and what I think is better and what mix-ups I have left and that kind of thing. But going on to a stage I think is going to be good for Inkbrush in particular. Basically, most of them I think are gonna be good. If I'm being honest, Aimbrush has a really varied toolkit, and it's not like any of those tools are going to be especially bad. I wouldn't even mind if they added more maps with really sort of narrow corridors. I know Hammerhead sort of looks like it's gonna have some, but maps with narrow corridors are no longer just off limits unless you know for certain there's nothing watching it, because you have Killer Whale, which is just a laser that fires autonomously and tracks people that you want dead. So that's pretty nice. So yeah, that's basically my my sort of thoughts on it. I think Octobrush is gonna be really I think Octobrush and Airbrush are both fine on most stages. Wahoo sucks. And yeah, thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
So the next thing we had on the list was about if the weapons feel better or worse than Splatoon 2. I think we're just going to skip this one because realistically, the weapons are 1-to-1. So whether or not they feel better or worse really boil down to just the kits, which we've already discussed. So, and then it looks like Chara has a bit of a time limit. So we'll want to try and move this ahead. So I think what we'll do is we'll combine the last two topics of do they need any changes, and if we think that they will have a spot in the meta, and we'll just put them together.
So I don't think Inkbrush needs any changes because I think the main weapon is insane and it just needs a good kit to go with it. As we saw in Splatoon 2, it is a very good main weapon. Not for killing though. Killing is optional with that weapon. But I think Octobrush does need some buffs, and I think the main issue is that it's competing with the likes of Tenatek and Blaster and all that, and I just don't think it's fast enough to compete with something like a shooter. I feel I think shooters in general are just so fast now that it's hard for Octobrush to justify use when it has so short range and it's it has the roll, but the roll doesn't really help much with its speed and trying to help it compete with something like a regular shooter. So I feel like it just needs these little trolley. I like where they were going with that one change, if you all remember it, where they made the brush flick to roll frames slightly faster. It was by 4 frames, I believe. If you guys remember that, and I think that felt really nice. I think they should cut down on that a little bit more, and just have Octobrush just feel a lot smoother to just transition from flicking and rolling and just flicking and rolling. Because right now you're just flicking, and you don't really use the roll that much, especially in combat. You don't use the roll at all. Um, and I just feel just making the overall flicking and rolling transition just a lot smoother and just a lot more quicker, and to make it more unique. It just makes it more unique from like shooters where you're just shooting and weaving between your ink and attacking. And Octopus, you can kind of do if you make the flicking and rolling experience just a lot smoother. You can kind of do that and just like in a different way, and I think it will make it really unique and make it a lot more viable in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but I don't think an ink brush needs anything. It's pretty crazy. I think there is always the possibility of ink brush specifically being meta. Um, I think the main weapon is really good, and I think if Nouveau has like a crazy kit, then I think it's just gonna it's gonna take a while for people to figure it out. But once they figure it out, it's gonna get going. Uh, Octobrush, I think, as you said, it would be more in like the middle of the pack weapon if it remains unchanged, and I think it'll go down more as people get used to it. But there's always going to be a few select players who will try to make it work. Um, and I don't think it'll. I can't see it being in the bottom tier. I think it's too good to be in the bottom tier, but it's also not good enough to be in the upper echelon. It's just that it's the middle of the pack weapon in the entire game in
Mhm.
terms of main weapons.
Right.
I think Inkbrush is pretty much fine. I think it has a good kit playstyle. Most of what I want for it is to just get Nouveau option so it can have both playstyles, and I think with that the weapon will probably be fine for the rest of Splatoon 3's lifespan. Octobrush I think needs something, but it's hard to say what to give it. The main thing that my mind jumps to is the rolling as well. I don't feel like it needs a major buff, but either the transition to rolling being faster or the rolling itself, I think, should actually be quicker. Like, if I had to give Octobrush something, I would probably just speed up the rolling speed just by like 5%, have it be a little bit better. Because I think with the end lag buffs that a lot of weapons got, not even just shooters like normal blaster, slosher, etc. got, I feel like the rolling of Octobrush is like over time felt more and more slow compared to the pace of everything else. And with Splatoon 3 introducing stuff like Tacticooler that gives you max swim and run speed, I feel like it's only going to feel worse. And that's kind of the main thing of the weapon I'd like to see buffed. It's hard to say though, because obviously it's a very good weapon at lower levels of play, and like even at top level, it'll still likely have a niche at worst. But I think mainly just I want to see a little bit more put into the role. I've kind of accepted that damage overlap Octobrush is not going to be a thing. And like if they really wanted to do that, they'll probably do it with the Splatanas, which actually have damage overlapping. So I think if they're going to keep Octobrush in the way it is now, which is okay, I guess, then I would prefer they just mess with the roll speed a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you think it would have a place? Either of them would have a place in the meta?
I think, like I've said before with the kits, I think Inkbrush will be, if you're good with it, you're going to be able to use it. And for Octobrush, it's just, okay, if you want a Zipcaster, then this is a weapon you'll play. Otherwise, it'll people who want to play Octobrush.
So I think for like everyone's just saying, it's probably gonna be a lot of repetition because everyone's kind of said my thoughts like one for one. So I'm just gonna change it up a little bit. Inkbrush, I think it's fine. I don't think that it really needs any changes. I think it plays well, and I think people are gonna be able to push it pretty far for those that are really invested in the weapon itself and like the way it plays. Um, Octobrush, I think it's just gonna be the same old. It's just gonna be a few people are running this thing really far in, complaining that it needs changes, and then still playing it after. Me. And so I think the main change I would do, like I was saying, a 1-to-1, is make the roll faster because now we don't have MPU to make that change for us anymore. And something I also found a little irritating is sometimes, and I know these were like casual players in turf war, sometimes a tactical position was not always in favor of where I wanted or needed to be. So in order to get those buffs that it gives you, I'd have to either abandon my good positioning or it'd be really lucky and appear right next to me. So the fact that we don't have MPU to fix the roll and I have to rely on tactical to give me those cool changes, I think I would have that be a buff. If they just fix the roll, make it a little faster, I think I'd be really satisfied with it. Overall, as like just a solid weapon, I wouldn't really have any complaints past that. Besides, if it had any possible kit issues, moving on out, if like the next two Octobrushes or possibly a fourth one are okay or maybe even better than what we're looking at right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think yeah, it's just gonna be, hey, you like it, play it. If you don't like it, don't like it. It's not gonna be anything crazy that's gonna change. It's not a game alternating weapon. It's not gonna be the thing that's the new craze. I think people who just are gonna be good with it are gonna be terrified, and people who are, not really good with it are gonna be really easy to kill. I think it's just one of those type of weapons that you just kind of throw into a specific comp that paints well, and then that's like kind of it. If you like it, you like it.
Mm-hmm. So I I agree with pretty much everybody here. I don't think the ink brush needs any changes. I would also agree that the Octobrush, realistically, the only thing you could really change that wouldn't greatly impact the playability for other players would be the roll speed, because while people like me and Chara can like reminisce about the old days of damage overlap Octobrush where you could two shot and maybe one shot somebody, realistically for the health of the game that's not coming back. Like that would be super unhealthy for the game, and then the perception of the weapon is already kind of soiled from Splatoon 2, where the casual players see the Octobrush as like this brain dead, stupid, super easy to kill with weapon that requires zero skill whatsoever. Like you can find millions and millions of posts of casual players claiming that the Octobrush is like the top tier best weapon in the game when it's literally like across the entirety of Splatoon 2 sort of sat at like B minus. So if they were to adjust damage at all, they would just piss off all of the casual player base. They would just ruin the game for a ton of people, and I don't see that happening. I feel like the most fair thing would be to quickly, like, to speed up the transition into the roll. Now, if you like stand and flick with the Octobrush and hold ZR, the roll starts after the flick animation has ended, and you just go straight into rolling. I feel like a good way they could speed it up is if you were holding the ZR button, when the brush starts the animation and gets to the point where it would start to roll, that is where it stops. Like it immediately transitions into rolling if the game can detect that you're holding the button down. So you don't have to wait for the whole animation of the swing to finish. You just need it to flick long enough to get into the roll position itself. I feel like that's probably the most fair thing they could do. Other than that, the Octobrush itself sits in a spot where realistically its stats are already pretty good for what it does, and the sort of role it plays in and the position it plays in, it's already good enough that it doesn't need to be realistically buffed in a whole lot of ways. Like the painting doesn't need to really be changed, the damage isn't going to get changed. So just a quality of life, like fixing how rolling works, would improve the playability of the weapon, but that's all it really needs. And then as for like meta positions, we talked about it already. I think the Octobrush will just sit in a niche where if a map is really good for Zipcaster and you have some really good angles, cool. If the meta is like super fast paced, the Inkbrush will play very well into a team comp that already plays super fast, because that's what that weapon does.
So I'm gonna try and keep this quick, because I know that we do not have too much time. In terms of, do I think they need any changes? I don't think that really there needs to be any sort of significant changes to Inkbrush. Personally, I'm a massive fan of the only real like change to it in game being that the actual bristles of the brush are now just really floppy. I just like that. And like Inkbrush in terms of the actual gameplay, I think it's fine as a main weapon. Doesn't really need anything changed. The like movement options that they've added in the game is more than enough of a buff, like for it to keep up with the meta and other like weapons that are around. Being able to squid roll to like camp ledges now is going to be really really nice. I think for Octobrush, like personally, I think they should give it this a similar sort of buff to what Inkbrush got a while back, where the fall off is like the rate of fall off is reduced. So basically, like instead of like Octobrush, like damage fall off is like a lot slower, if that makes sense. I think that would be a pretty nice like quality of life thing. The big thing that I want though is the main power up effect of both brushes in Splatoon 2 is to widen the trail width and also slightly increase the rolling speed. Though for Inkbrush this was basically negligible because it had probably the worst scaling of anything in the entire game for the roll speed specifically. But for Inkbrush and for Octobrush, I think they should give that to intensify action. It would make sense, because it would make sense that if you are rolling with the weapon more intensely, you're putting more paint down. I think it's just like a nice quality life thing. I think it would also be like pretty good for Octobrush since it's been how many years has it been? It's been about 7 years since Octobrush was dropped onto the world, and it still can't turn left. So like,
oh, I completely forgot about that. Right.
yeah, it would be really nice if it could do something then like spin like a record right round. Like I wanted to spin left round, or like be able to go left and right, do a little wiggle. Like something. Like, it needs that. Like having part of your weapon's identity be defined by the fact that it cannot turn in a single fucking direction is just kind of depressing, if I'm being honest. And I think it's high time that they change it. They fixed so many other things over the 7 years since Octobrush was initially dropped onto the world, damage overlapping and all. I think it would be worth it if they actually like let Octobrush just turn left. Even if it is with the help of a little bit of intensify action, I think that's just a really nice thing that they can do with it. And also like another small change that I think isn't necessary at all, but something that I think would personally like just help Octobrush a little bit right now is the angle at which the globs come out. It's pretty nice, but it's like ultimately not the best for ledge camping. So if there was some way to like sort of change their trajectory so that it like goes over ledges slightly better, I think that would also be like a really nice thing to help Octobrush out, rather than effectively having like not like barely better ledge camping capabilities than Inkbrush due to the angle at which the globs come out. So yeah, as for I think they're going to have a place in the meta. Inkbrush will definitely have a place in the meta, at least in high level. I plan to continue playing it, as does I'm sure Trizzy, Rob, and Lulu. I'm sure there'll be some more like brushes coming in from NA. NA is surprisingly devoid of Inkbrush at high level. It'd be really cool to see some people rise up, and I think with the versatility of the new kit, that's going to happen. Like it's absolutely going to happen. It's gonna be nice. So yeah, I think like Inkbrush, as I say, there are players who are good with it that are going to continue being good at it. So that's basically covered at high level. As for other levels of play, it's all just about whether someone decides, oh, I like Inkbrush, I'm gonna try and get better with it and go from there. Octobrush, like, I think it'll be niche at most. But I think overall for Octobrush, like, again, it's going to depend on Zipcaster. If Zipcaster is going to be really good, Octobrush is going to be really good. If Zipcaster is not, Octobrush might not be so great. And as the game like continues on and on, we're going to probably see more Zipcaster weapons come out, and Octobrush just kind of has to hope and pray that none of them like compete with it too hard. It's kind of lucky right now. There are other short range weapons with Zipcaster, but Octobrush is better than them. Then there's a sort of mid range weapon with the Splatana Stamper that also has Zipcaster, but there's not really much of an overlap there, and Octobrush can more directly take advantage of it, I feel. So it's fine for now, but it's like the future for it is definitely uncertain. So yeah.